I would say it is extremely important for students to be in control of the pace that they're learning at and in control of what it is that they're learning. You can't teach an art student marine you could teach them marine biology, I guess, if they're interested in that. But if they don't want to learn that, and if they're actively against learning that, no matter how long you spend in that classroom, they're never learning it. And if you're going marine biology over the course of 3 years when you could do it in 3 months, that's also a problem. And, vice versa. If you're doing it at 3 months when it should take 3 years, that's an issue as well.
Welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. I'm your host, Debbie Reber. I'm so excited to have Jordan O'Kelly on the podcast today. Jordan is a 16-year-old college junior in the Honors College at Cal State, Los Angeles, where he is majoring in physics and journalism and is employed as a math tutor. And yes, you heard that right. Jordan is only 16 years old. But even at this young age, twice exceptional Jordan has become a powerful advocate for the 2E community. And so I wanted to share his work and his journey with you. Diagnosed with autism at 4 and identified as gifted at age 10, Jordan's list of projects includes writing a book of humorous short stories called O'Kelly Legendary Legends of Legend in 4th grade as a way to get out of doing summaries of other books, adapting the book to a series of monologues, which he presented as a fundraiser for SENG, and being the subject of a documentary about the production of the monologue show. Jordan also speaks at educational conferences about his experience as a 2E student. I had the pleasure of meeting Jordan a few years ago, and so I loved having this chance to catch up with him. In this conversation, you'll hear about Jordan's journey from feeling lonely and isolated in elementary school to being empowered and becoming a self-directed student, what it's like to be a 16-year-old junior in college, how his family's advocacy and educational resource, the O'Kelly Lab, began, and much more. If you are raising a 2E teen, this episode is for you, and also for your teen. All right, now let's get to my conversation with Jordan. Hey, Jordan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, happy to be here.
I am looking forward to this, and I really appreciate you doing this when you're not feeling well today. It means a lot to me, and I'm just really excited to share your work. You have work, you're a young person, and you've already done so much in your life, so I really wanted to share you with my listeners. But I'd love if you could start us off by just introducing yourself in your own words. How would you describe yourself?
Well, I'm Jordan O'Kelly. I'm a 2E or differently wired student who goes to Cal State LA. I am 16 years old, soon to be 17 in February. And I'm a I'm a 2E advocate is what I'm trying to say.
You are such a powerful voice in 2E advocacy, and we will definitely get into all of that. And just as the mother of a 2E 17-year-old, I am so grateful for the work that you do and your many contributions to supporting kids like you and the parents raising them. So thank you for that. And we will get into that. But I want to talk a little bit about your journey as a young person. So you were diagnosed as autistic when you were 4, I believe, and you had an IEP from the time you were in kindergarten on. And then when you were in 4th grade, tell me if I get these dates wrong, but I believe that's when you were identified as being gifted. So I'd love to know how you really identified, how you saw yourself as a student back then when you were in elementary school.
Sure. Well, in elementary school, if I had to define my time there, I would say I was lonely. I felt different from everyone because in a way I was different from everyone. And so it was very difficult for me to make friends. I had a full-time aide. That was my friend. So elementary school was a very isolating time, and I just wasn't having a good time there. Learning is hard, and making friends is hard. So if I had to kind of describe myself in elementary school, I would probably say lonely, lonesome.
It's so interesting. Well, as you're saying that, I'm remembering that was something, I think when Asher was in maybe 1st grade, that came up at a therapy session, that they felt really proud of who they were. And the other word that came up was lonely. My hunch is that that's a common experience for young people who don't quite fit into the box that they're being asked to fit into.
Exactly. I felt different from everyone. And so I was kind of isolated. I couldn't really, I couldn't figure out how to talk to people my age. It was difficult. That all changed in middle school because that's when I went to Bridges and Bridges Academy, for those who don't know. And they have a whole different education model. And I was with like-minded peers in an environment where I wasn't completely stressed out about schoolwork and a plethora of other factors that made my time at Bridges much more enjoyable because I had friends now. That was where I made my first real friends, was at Bridges Academy.
Yes, I am a big fan of Bridges. That's where we actually got to meet in person when I visited Bridges a few years ago, and so grateful. I wish there were Bridges everywhere. I'm wondering, going back even to elementary school as well. So you were identified as gifted. You felt lonely, like you didn't quite fit in. Did you know how smart you were at the time? I imagine you were thinking about things in a different way than your peers were, but at the same time, you had this one-on-one aid. So was that confusing to you, like where you fit in?
Well, it's hard to kind of give a good answer because every kid, in elementary school thinks they're the coolest guy ever, when I was just a gelatinous little orb. I would say in the classroom, I always wanted to be, I watched Cosmos when I was 8 years old. And so that inspired me to go into science and stuff. And I wanted to be a physicist. But as far as I remember, I was not particularly good in any classes in elementary school. In fact, I remember being kind of behind in several classes, most notably mathematics, which is kind of bad if you want to be a physicist. But I didn't know that was involved in physics at the time. I didn't feel smart. As a child, maybe there was I probably am smarter, but I would attribute that mostly to just being a child. As a person, reflecting on it, didn't feel smarter. I felt, kind of dumber than everyone else.
That is a common thread that I hear from so many differently wired teens, adults, young adults, is identifying, having your identity change from the way you felt about yourself as a student when you were little, and then kind of really stepping into your strengths, which obviously Bridges was a great match and really helping you kind of lean into your strengths because you are in college now. You said you're 16. So tell us about that. How did that happen? And are you studying physics?
Well, to answer that, are you studying physics? Yeah. Bridges is a fantastic school to be at. And they kind of, take the brakes off in that there's no work for the sake of work at Bridges. You're learning all the time, but that also makes it so you have a lot of free time outside of Bridges, and Bridges is not a very stressful environment. It's not taking up 100% of your time. And that enabled me to, when I found out about this thing called the early entrance program, which allows students as young as, I believe, 12 to enter college, I was like, I have the time and the ability, or rather, I didn't know about the ability, but I definitely had the time to at least try for this. I want to see if I can do it. I wanted to challenge myself and see if I could really accomplish something that most people wouldn't. And so, I studied math outside of school. And as it turned out, with a one-on-one tutor, I might add. And as it turned out, despite being kind of delayed in math, inside of the traditional education system and kind of behind in math, even in Bridges, studying with a tutor who would write everything down, who would take notes for me, and who I could talk to and go back and could you explain that again in a one-on-one environment where there wasn't a whole classroom of kids to teach, I was able to learn all of high school math within a few months, which was surprising to me. And I think it was at about the point that we started graphing curved graphs that I was like, oh, I'm in the big leagues now. That didn't take long. How did I do that? And so I did that and then, studied for the other subjects as well. But math was where I really needed to catch up, and I caught up, thankfully. Took the SATs, which was required back then, but now it's not because I believe California state schools don't require those anymore. So I took the SATs, got a high enough score to get in by, I didn't think I would, no one ever does, I'm sure. And then I got in. And so now I'm a junior in college at the age of 16.
Wow. I have so many questions about that, but I don't want to spend all our time talking about your college life as a young person. But I would love to know kind of just generally, what has it been like being in college? Has it been what you hoped it would be? And are you still as excited about your career goals of being a physicist?
Being in college, I am so glad, I'm so glad I got to skip high school, because in college, first of all, what they do at this particular program that they don't do at most colleges that I think is important is they take you and a bunch of other kids who applied, if you get through the SATs and the entrance interview, they take you and they put you in the summer program where they enroll you in 3 classes, kind of like pseudo classes, with professors from the program. And they see how you do, not just grades wise, but, also being able to function in the classroom and stuff. Those were, at the time, I had never taken a class as difficult as any of those classes, and so it was a new challenge for me. And I think it was a new challenge for everyone else in the program. And so you had to kind of band together to get through it, especially the math class. The math class had a professor who I love dearly. He is probably the best teacher I've ever had. No offense to any of the other teachers who may be listening. He's unbelievable. He was amazing teacher. So extremely difficult. The only time I've given my all in a class, really dedicated myself fully 100% to this class and got a C. But extremely difficult professor. We had to band together to get through that, and I made some friends that I've had for years since then, really good friends, the kinds of friends I hadn't had before. So in that environment, I think is a great way to kind of not only expand your social horizons, but really meet people that you're going to know for the rest of your life. So that's something important that the program does. And then also an important thing, they give you, obviously it's college, so you're selecting your classes. They give you a sense of control over what you're studying that I feel like you don't get in other education systems. They trust you to make the right decisions with what classes you're going to take. That's crucial to me because that makes classes way more engaging. If it's something A, you're interested in, and B, you're the one who picked this class, you have to see it through. And so I think that kind of sense of responsibility and being trusted like that is crucial to the whole education thing. And as for how it is studying physics, it's great. I just took a computational physics class and I thought it was actually really interesting. I didn't expect to like it, but I liked it.
We'll be right back after this quick break. Maybe I've watched too many seasons of The Amazing Race, but every time I have to go somewhere on the subway, I treat it like a competition. It's all about making the right gut decisions about which route will get me there the fastest. Sometimes those decisions get me where I'm going early, and other times my gambles don't really pay off. Probiotics can't help with most gut decisions, but if your gut needs a little support, Ritual has your back. Their Symbiotic Plus, a 3-in-1 supplement, has clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic to support a balanced gut microbiome. I've been using Symbiotic Plus for about 6 months now, and it's become a core part of my morning routine. I take the mini capsule every morning while making my way through my inbox, whether I'm at home or I'm on the road, because it doesn't need to be refrigerated. And the capsule itself is delayed released, which helps it survive the harsh conditions of the upper GI tract for delivery to the colon. And that's exactly where we want it to go. Ritual invested in a study modeling the human colon, which showed that Symbiotic Plus significantly increased microbial diversity and the growth of beneficial bacteria. There's no more shame in your gut game. Symbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate, not hide your insides. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/tilt. Start Ritual or add Symbiotic Plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/tilt for 25% off. During this month of planning and organization for big transitions, rhythms and routines have been absolutely essential for our physical and emotional well-being. So Green Chef nights are reliably and predictably a good night. We know the ingredients will be fresh and prepped, the instructions easy to follow, and the meal delicious. We're all still talking about last week's turkey tacos with mango chimichurri sauce, refried beans, and Monterey Jack cheese. Green Chef contributes to a healthy lifestyle with easy and delicious menus like fresh seasonal salads and grain bowls. And with over 80 weekly meal and market options, plus rotating options to suit a variety of lifestyles, whether Mediterranean, plant-based, calorie-smart, keto, protein-packed, gluten-free, there are always plenty of options to choose from. Whatever you select, you'll get farm-fresh ingredients, organic whole fruits and veggies, and premium proteins, all delivered straight to your door. I love those 4 words. Straight to my door. Oh, and one more thing I love about Green Chef, they have an app, which means it's easy to manage meal preferences and delivery from your phone if you want to. And I, for one, want to. I am in that mode where I'm making the most of little moments like waiting in line at the pharmacy or for the F train to pull into the station to tackle all of those to-dos. So the convenience of an app is key for me. Green Chef has a special offer for Tilt listeners. Go to greenchef.com/tilt50 and use code TILT50 to get 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months. That's 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months when you use the code TILT50 at greenchef.com/tilt50. So one of my questions, and you kind of answered it, but just to go back to it, is that you said you've made these incredible friends in college, and so much of what I know I tell Asher and what I know so many parents who have kids who are not thriving in school, we're always saying, hang on. Once you get to college, you'll find your people. You'll be with the people who care about the things that you care about. It's not going to feel as oppressive maybe as traditional education. So you have found that to be the case. You've kind of found your people there.
Yes. Though, I will say, I found my people, through the early entrance program, and that was that was meant to make you kind of make lifelong friends, in essence. I mean, a part of it. From what I understand, and obviously I've never had this experience, but from what I understand and what they taught us in one of the classes that was not over the summer, but semester 1, which was all about, getting to know people and functioning on a college campus. It can be lonely, especially during a pandemic, to go to college, because whereas in high school, you're meeting people all the time, just naturally, you have to go to every class with them. In college, I bet it's possible to go the whole time without interacting with another student. So I know it can be very lonely. And I read a whole book in that one particular class about someone who went to a nice college, but didn't feel like she deserved to be there. Felt like she was less than everyone. And that was, book's called Make Your Home Among Strangers, great book. And so she was very lonely the whole time. So don't let yourself be that. Friends, the early entrance program kind of makes it so they come to you naturally. But the impression I get is that when you get into college, they're not going to just come to you naturally. But if they do come to you, or if you come to them, it's absolutely lifelong, worth it connections.
That's great. Great. Thank you. Such a thoughtful answer. We'll talk more about college another time because I still have more questions, but I really want to talk about the O'Kelly Lab and just all of the various projects you've done throughout the course of your life, your young life. And I want to start with what ultimately became the O'Kelly Lab. I know that when you were in kindergarten, you had created an all positive behavior chart, which actually you have made a form of this available for listeners as well. But can you talk about that chart that you created and how that kind of evolved into what became the O'Kelly Lab?
So yes, in kindergarten, I was in class and my teacher had this behavior chart, the kind of stoplight chart, red on top, yellow, and then green little clothespins with everyone's name. And she would move them up and down periodically throughout the day whenever a kid acted out. And I remember being dissatisfied with this. And then, I saw it was making kids cry, like upset in the class. And I just thought, as a kindergartner, that's not right. So I designed my own, a very scrappy drawing from someone who can't really hold a pencil correctly, but designed my own all positive one where you are rewarded or not rewarded. You never mark down or at a baseline. And so that ended up getting implemented at various schools in a student's IEP, I believe. And so that kind of started an idea train. I came up with several ideas. After that, wrote a book that was kind of a collection of short stories in order to get out of doing summaries of other books in 4th grade. And so whenever I have ideas or whenever anyone in my family has ideas that could help people, we put them up on the O'Kelly Lab. And that's just a website, a place on the internet where these potentially helpful ideas could go.
I would say they're very helpful. So I think you're being a little modest, but I love that you, as a kindergartner, were like, this is wrong and I have a better way. So let me share that with you. And I think that's fantastic. You mentioned the book, the collection of stories. So I'd love if you could talk more about those, because that is the route for more projects that I want to get into. But can you talk about the impetus behind the book and your why for that?
Yeah, so in fourth grade, I had a great teacher. It was kind of prior to that, teacher, where I was kind of dissatisfied in the classroom. And then a great teacher, Miss Matz. And she was the one who recognized that I could be differently wired or twice exceptional. In that class, she had us writing summaries of books. She wanted to encourage her students to read, and so she would have us write summaries of books weekly. Except I interpreted that as read like a 400-page book every week and then write a summary of it. I was like, this is impossible. This is not right. And eventually I just started cheesing it with like 12-page books. I did one on Harold and the Purple Crayon. And then eventually that caught up with my mother. So we went in, had a talk, said, I would rather write a book than write summaries of books. And that ended up happening because Miss Matz is awesome. And so I turned that in. I turned in a chapter every week, I should say. And then after the school year, proceeded to completely forget about it until several years later. I think that my memory is a little, I'm so bad with dates, but it was, I think several years later, we decided to actually publish it. And that ended up becoming we ended up adapting that into a monologue show where people would go up and read a monologue, next person, read a monologue, et cetera, et cetera. Then we ended up putting on that monologue show after Dr. James Webb passed away of SENG, supporting the emotional needs of the gifted. I was like, we need to do something to support this organization. Ended up putting on the monologue show, raising a few $100s for the organization. Proud of that. And then from there, we ended up making a documentary about the monologue show, about the book. And now we're kind of trying to promote that and get the word out.
It's very meta. You have the documentary about the monologue show, which is based on a book. I love it. And I got to watch the documentary, and it's so good. It's called The O'Kelly Legends, 2E Behind the Scenes. How did you know, at what point did you know that you wanted to document this process of putting on this monologue show? How did that happen?
I think not from day one, but pretty early on in the process. My mother just started filming. She films everything. She's one of those that takes like 20 pictures of the same shot just to make sure she has it. So she films everything. And then we ended up getting cameras in there, and she decided at some point, in there, we should be filming this with real cameras and make something out of it. And, we were all like, okay, that's sure, whatever. I'm sure that'll happen at some point. Lo and behold, it happened. Or rather, it didn't happen. It took a lot of conscious effort from everyone in the family, but especially my mother, my dad, and my sister, Rachel, who kind of got pulled into the project and then ended up being a massive part of it. I was kind of uninvolved with it. I helped out every now and then.
I saw you as kind of the documentary has a star. I mean, you are the one. It's really fascinating. And listeners, I'll make sure that you know how to learn more about the documentary as well. You document your process of being a casting director, right? Of casting the students who will be a part of the monologue show. You've got casting directors in there coaching you, which was really cool to see. You have casting directors coaching the other students on how to better audition and all of that. I found that all to be fascinating. And I'm wondering, what was that process like for you?
Well, I'll tell you, I consider myself a cinephile. I'm interested in film. And so I was like, okay, well, surely this will be easy. I just have to, grade these people's performances. And I get there and I'm like, I don't know the first thing about acting. I don't know what I'm doing. Now I would like to think I know a bit more about that. But, at the moment I was like, oh, this is time to latch on to time to latch on to these casting directors. And so I did. And actually only one of them is a casting director. The other one's just a director. And I ended up learning a lot about it as I was doing it. And you can actually see in the documentary, I go from, oh, that was pretty good, to actually, starting to kind of give baby steps in terms of feedback. And, I like the way you ... And so I remember there's one clip that I find particularly funny where I go, I like the way you put the emphasis on the right words for about 30 seconds before I realize I should just stop talking because I don't know where this sentence is going. And so it was fun to kind of learn the ropes as I was going through the process.
And I'd love to know, you mentioned that, and you talk about this in the film, that you wanted to put this show on as a fundraiser for SENG and supporting the emotional needs of the gifted in honor of Dr. Webb. And I'd love to just know, why is SENG so close to your heart?
Well, I mean, it's without them, I wouldn't be where I am. They're just an important organization for kind of letting parents, especially parents and teachers, but, in my experience, parents especially, what's going on, and teaching them the ways to make it so your child can actually succeed and thrive. And if it were not for their advice, I don't know, I don't know where I would be. High school, probably. So they're just so important for so many people. And after Dr. James Webb passed away, I was like, well, there's a big hole left in this organization. May as well try to fill it with money. And so I figured they need all the help they can get right now. And they happily accepted it. So I'm happy.
I'm sure. Yeah. And listeners, if you are new to this world, SENG is a wonderful organization. And we had Dr. Mike Postma, who used to be the executive director, on the podcast, and I'll include a link for that so you can check it out. But they are such an important organization because it is, that emotional needs piece is so critical. And so they really do understand our kids. They understand the challenges of being twice exceptional and navigating the world in that way. So that's so cool that you did that. We'll be right back after this quick break. Hey there, it's Debbie. I love making this show and sharing conversations about how to support our awesome neurodivergent kids. I've seen how even one little insight from an interview can spark a big shift in daily life. But I know that raising complex kids can be messy and lonely. And just when we think we figured it out, something comes up that boots us right back to feeling overwhelmed and stuck. That's why I've poured everything into creating a way for parents like us navigating complex parenting journeys to join together and chart a path that feels positive, hopeful, and doable. It's the brand new Differently Wired Club experience. In the club, you'll get personal support from me and other seasoned parent coaches, 6 live calls every month where you can connect and get your personal questions answered, the opportunity to learn directly from authors and experts like I have on this show, monthly themes for getting specific and tactical, an exclusive private podcast feed, and the best, most generous community of parents. Seriously, these folks show up for themselves and each other, and that right there is really everything. Because it's a daily reminder that we're not alone. Our kids aren't broken, and we have totally got this. The recently rebooted Differently Wired Club is on a brand new platform with its very own iOS and Android app. It is such a great space. However you learn, whatever your style, no matter the ages, genders, and neurodivergent profile of your children, the Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Join us today by going to tiltparenting.com/club. That's tiltparenting.com/club. I hope to see you on the inside.
Lynn, this time of year, parenting can be such a flusterclux.
You've come to the right place.
I'm Lynn Lyons, and I've been treating anxious families for over 30 years.
I'm Lynn's sister-in-law and co-host Robin Hudson.
Join us for Flusterclux, a podcast for parents who worry.
Wait, that's everybody.
Yeah, these last few years have felt like one long anxiety attack for so many.
Why do you think parents are always surprised that a podcast about anxiety relates to them, even if no one in their house has an anxiety disorder?
Well, worry is human. Everyone does it. And anxiety shows up when we face uncertainty.
All the parenting tips you've taught me have been essential.
I love to break it down into skills we need to manage worry in our families.
We've covered so many topics: depression, burnout, meltdowns, perfectionism.
Don't forget scary mothers-in-law.
Right, but of course that's not my mother-in-law.
Because that's my mother.
And a listener.
As a psychotherapist, I like to teach parents and kids how to respond to everyday moments in healthy ways.
Managing anxiety really can be taught.
It really can. And I'll even tell you what to say.
We talk about serious stuff, but without being too serious.
Anxiety wants everything serious. Anxiety doesn't stand a chance when we're laughing, even about the tough stuff.
So I want to shift to some of the other resources that you offer. You actually, I think you may have done this a few years ago. I remember when you first created the 2E Like Me video, and you really did that for students, correct?
Yeah. So a kind of piece that it hasn't gone unmentioned, but it's basically gone unmentioned, is that I have dysgraphia. And that means it's very difficult for me to handwrite things, especially on paper. And so that's why I would never take notes in math class or anything, is because, writing was physically painful. I remember getting in trouble a lot because I wouldn't write out any of my work in math. And so I would lose points because they were like, how'd you get this answer? Because I would do it all in my head. Inaccurately, most of the time, I would do it all in my head. So I have dysgraphia, and that made it very difficult for me in math class. And no one would have ever guessed that it was dysgraphia because it looked like, I was just not good in math. And so I was like, there are other people with this issue like me, and they're going kind of undocumented. And so I ended up making that video on how I overcame that. And the answer was with an iPad, which is not easy to procure, but worth it. An iPad and an Apple Pencil or something similar. I'm sure an ink tablet would probably be fine. But that made it easy for me to take notes in math. And that was all the difference. I mean, for my entire elementary school career, not a page of notes. For my middle school career, some notes, but not really. For my college career, I could probably fill a textbook with the number of notes I have. So I made that video because I wanted to help students. And the long and short of it is invest in some technology because you need it. It's not fair if you don't have it.
Absolutely. In that video, you refer to something called the PIPS, which stands for Pace, Influence, Purpose, and Supports. And you're such a good advocate for yourself, and now you're helping other students learn how to advocate for themselves. I'm just wondering, at what point did you feel like I get to be in charge of my education rather than being told what your education would be?
In elementary school, that wasn't the case. I felt like I was being kind of pushed through a system meant to make me a person who knew a set of facts. And then in middle school, I had the supports I needed and I had the time I needed. But it was only in, I believe, 7th grade that I really decided, I'm going to make use of this. I'm going to put myself towards something here. Started learning outside of class and taking charge and deciding, here's the pace that I'm going to learn at. Here's what I'm going to learn. And I'm going to learn it all before the SATs. That was when I started making the decisions, and it worked out. It's so important to have. I'm obviously not an education expert, and I don't have a doctorate or anything. So this is just me, seat in my pants reasoning. But I would say it is extremely important for students to be in control of the pace that they're learning at and in control of what it is that they're learning. You can't teach an art student marine you could teach them marine biology, I guess, if they're interested in that. But if they don't want to learn that, and if they're actively against learning that, no matter how long you spend in that classroom, they're never learning it. And if you're going marine biology over the course of 3 years when you could do it in 3 months, that's also a problem. And, vice versa. If you're doing it at 3 months when it should take 3 years, that's an issue as well. So having students being able to set those is really important.
I love the way that you said that something we talk a lot about on this show is being a self-directed learner and self-driven, that we can't make our kids care about things. We can't make them learn things. And I'm just going to encourage listeners to, if this is something you want to explore more, Blake Bowles, who is an unschooler I've had on the show once or twice to talk about self-directed learning. And it is really such a powerful way for twice exceptional students, especially, to really have control over their journey. And you're such a great role model for what that can look like. I've just 2 more questions, well, maybe 3. I know that there are parents who are going to be listening to the show with their twice exceptional teens, because it can just be really inspiring for teens who maybe aren't feeling like they're in control of their education or that they are capable of pursuing the things they want to pursue, to hear from someone who is successfully doing that. And I'm wondering if you have any advice for a 2E teenager who is feeling disengaged or bored, or like they're kind of stuck.
It's not the subjects. Human beings, it's taken us 20,000 years to get to this point, perhaps more. And we didn't do it because it was boring to think about these things. We're not being taught the right way. And so if you can look it up outside of class, let me give an example with math. Inside of the classroom, math is numbers on a chalkboard or a whiteboard that you memorize, write down, put the sum, whatever. And outside of the classroom, math is the definition of beauty. Like it's unbelievable, what you can learn off of the internet. My point is, if you're bored in the classroom, you're being educated wrong, and that you should take initiative and challenge yourself. See how far you can get is what really motivated me, is see how much you can learn, and you will surprise yourself with how interesting these subjects can be when you really dedicate yourself to them.
That's great advice. And I tracked what you were saying and it really, the joy came through, that everything is interesting when it's relevant to the world we live in, right? Learning math facts on a whiteboard, maybe that inspires some people, but it's when you can apply and see how math is everywhere, right, that it gets really exciting. So I get what you were saying. That's very cool. Before we say goodbye, I do want to just ask you about your summer internship that you did with NASA. I think that is something that certainly my eyes lit up when I saw that you had that opportunity to participate in their N3 program. And I know there are a lot of listeners whose kids are really into STEM and would love to learn more about that. So can you just tell us what that was?
Sure. I'm going to preface this by saying I've been lucky about a lot of things. I'm lucky to live where I live and have a family that knows about SENG and, be in the program I'm in. I am very lucky to have had the opportunity to find out about and participate in the N3 program. It's NASA's Neurodiversity Network is N3. And it's basically a new program, brand new, designed by Dr. Lynn Kaminsky of Sonoma State University, or I don't know if it's designed by her, but it's definitely run by her, where students get to work with a NASA scientist on some project that they decide. So if you're interested in something and it involves aeronautics, space, or I guess administration, no, if you're interested in something that involves space or aeronautics or anything like that, how about working with a NASA scientist about it? That's amazing. What a great opportunity. And so I got that chance. And, obviously it's good for a lot of things like, resume, lab experience, how great. It's the real beauty of it is that it teaches you what it's like to work in these fields that you're actually interested in. I can be interested in physics all I want. I never knew what it was like to work in the field of physics until I worked with the N3 program. And you know what? after doing that, I can say I'm very comfortable in my decision to major in that. I love this field. I wouldn't change it for the world. And that's the sort of assurance, that's the sort of experience that you could pretty much only get, especially in high school or, at high school age. That's the sort of experience that you could pretty much only get from a program like this. So apply for it. It's good. It's for autistic students who are in high school.
Oh, that's great. Listeners, I'll have a link to where you can learn more about that in the show notes as well. And I just have to ask you, because you seem to me to be someone who always has a lot going on, a lot of perhaps projects, even though you're also a college student. I'm just wondering, what are you most excited about in your life right now?
Oh boy, most excited about.
Big question.
In terms of projects, always waiting for new ones. Or waiting. Yeah, I guess it is kind of inevitable that one's going to happen and come along, and then we're going to do it. Right now, we're just trying to promote the film a lot, and then, I've got a new semester coming up. That's pretty exciting. It's supposedly going to be in person, but it just got delayed 3 weeks. So, air quotes in person. But, new semester's a new semester, and I'm just excited to see, what's going to come down the road. Expect more, always more. You can find it at theokellylab.com.
That's a perfect way to close this out, because I was going to ask where people can learn more about you. Where are you most active? Is it the website, or are there any social media places where people can engage?
There's social media places. I wouldn't call myself active per se, but there's stuff there. That's the O'Kelly Lab on Facebook, Instagram, pretty sure. Any social media, it's just the O'Kelly Lab or at the O'Kelly Lab. And then you can find all those socials and a bunch of other important things at www.theokellylab.com. That's going to have, I should clarify the spelling because everyone gets this wrong, www.theokelley, there's an E there after 2 L's, lab.com. And that's going to have a bunch of resources. Look it up. It's good. It's got good things. It's got mime. There's a mime there, among other things.
There is a mime there. Yes, definitely look it up, listeners. There are great resources there. And there's so many things we could have talked about, but I so appreciate you kind of giving us a window into your journey and your world and what you're up to. And I just so appreciate who you are in the world and the way you really are supporting all of our 2E kids. You're making such an impact. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy to oblige. I would be doing this one way or the other.
I love that.
Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure.
Thank you for having me on, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to all these wonderful people.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. If you want to dig deeper into this episode, check out the show notes page. Every episode has a dedicated show notes page on my website where you can get links to all the resources we discussed, read a transcript, and even easily go back and listen to key takeaways by using the chapters feature on the podcast player. To get to the show notes page for this episode, just go to tiltparenting.com/podcast and select this show. If you love this podcast and want to help cover the cost of its production, please consider joining my Patreon campaign. For as little as $2 a month, you can help cover the cost of the hosting platform for this show, my wonderful new editor and producer, Andrea, and more. It's so easy to sign up. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more, or click on the Patreon link on any show notes page. If you're into social media, you can follow Tilt Parenting at Tilt Parenting on Instagram and Twitter. Visit the Tilt Parenting page on Facebook or join my Facebook community called Tilt Together. Lastly, please help this podcast stay visible and easily found by subscribing and leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information, visit www.tiltparenting.com.
If you're a parent, I invite you to join us at the Mindful Mama podcast, where it's all about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. With sometimes hilarious and always thought-provoking experts and friends, at Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm Hunter Clark Fields, and I can't wait to see you there. Listen in to the Mindful Mama podcast.